1990, Andy and I went on a motorbike trip, and today is
2025,
and you're the mathematician.
35 years.
Oh, back of the net. So we're now two old blokes, and we're recapping on a trip we did all those years ago. So we've got a journal which neither of us knew existed.
I don't remember doing that at all.
So the journal is from the day, and it's a true and accurate journal of what happened, whereas our memories are obviously now distorted. So I'm suggesting...
With rose-tinted spectacles of time.
With rose-tinted spectacles of time, because everybody's in love with their youth. Yeah. So I'm suggesting we use the journal as a reference. We've then got a map, we've got a set of photos, and we just explore our past in a leisurely fashion.
Sounds fantastic. I look forward to it.
Did we?
And I... Go on.
Did we originally plan to go to Istanbul?
My recollection is we did, because I think we wanted to do a big classic ride, and there obviously is one big classic ride, which is in the USA, coast to coast, Route 66 or whatever it may be. But we were students in our early 20s, and there's no way we were going to afford to get a plane to New York to even start doing that, let alone buy a motorbike or rent a motorbike or do all that, so that wasn't going to happen. But riding across the continent, we're at one side of Europe. Where does Europe finish?
Asia.
And Asia, we go across the Bosphorus. I think we did. That was the plan. If we go to Istanbul, we go across the bridge. We have ridden across the continent. Sure, it's not Route 66, but it's our version of Route 66.
And I'm sure it would have been your plan. You're the map man, and I assume it was your plan.
Well,
so
teamwork.
1990. This book is designed to be a journal of my proposed tour across Europe, heading for Turkey on a motorcycle with my friend Andrew. It's worth noting the purchase of my bike is the first step towards the holiday, Thursday, March the 15th. Today I bought an XT600. It's a 1985 model for £1,000 cash. Monday the 19th of March. I went to St Mathan's Bar for a beer with some friends. A friend said somebody was playing with my bike. When they saw us, they pushed the bike over and ran away. So on looking at the bike, we found all the ignition and half the lighting wires had been cut through. So we were then up till 2 o'clock in the morning in the halls of residence kitchen, soldering all the wires back together. Hard panniers at £3 each or £6 a pair were added, and a large double helmet top box at £10. These were mounted on a rack which was welded together at Bristol Polytechnic from two existing racks at the cost of £7, I think. Next followed a large petrol tank holding 20 litres of petrol, to which I fitted a second petrol tap. Seems to be a bit missing from the journal here. I've definitely got two photographs of the XT on recovery vehicles. Well, after the replacement of the headstock bearings, which caused great problems removing the existing worn-out bearings, the bike was, however, restored to its former glory. Then came a real blow. The drive shaft coming from the gearbox to the front sprocket was almost stripped on the spline. So I collected the required items before phoning the AA to have the motorcycle taken to my parents' home. I then spent 4 days with the help of my friend Steve and replaced the shaft, involving splitting the crankcase. This was done without any real problems, simply a stubborn clutch and flywheel nut. Really? This amazes me. Surely it's the ignorance of youth. Steve and I thought we could just take the engine to bits, replace the shaft, and it'd work. And my God, it did. Amazing. Now it's time to introduce Andy's bike. He chose a 1986 GPZ 600R. It was basically a standard bike, but it was a very pretty bike. Andy was a bit of an adrenaline seeker. He was quite at home, pulling wheelies, doing burnouts and driving too fast. The opposite of my riding style. He chose soft luggage, which was attached with a multitude of bungee straps. Day 1, starting in the north of England, ending up in the south of England, and a total of 261 miles. Tuesday the 10th of July, I set off from my hometown of Winsford at 9 o'clock in the morning. I then drove to Andrew's house at Sear Green for lunch. We then drove the pair of us to Liz's house in Kent. Liz was a fellow student at Bristol Polytechnic.
We had a lovely supper at the family table and then went with Liz to the local pub, the Spotted Dog. It was a good view, but far too many flies. Apparently Liz's younger sister Louise quite likes Andy. What that means, who knows. Several drinks and a very variable conversation later, we returned home. Our suspicions of a overly caring mother were proved correct when we had to tick off our names on a list left on the kitchen table when we arrived home.
Day 2. Today we visit France. We're starting in southern England, we're taking a ferry across the English Channel, and we're ending up in northern France. Our daily mileage is 160 miles. Wednesday, the 11th of July. We got up at around 8:30 to see Liz off before she went to work, then headed out for Dover and the ferry port. We went to the tourist information where we booked ferry crossing on the 1:30 to Calais. On arriving in France, we decided to go straight to Lille to visit Muriel. She was a lady I met the previous year while hitchhiking around Europe. When in Lille, we tried to phone, only could not get through. So asking several people, we finally found her flat. However, she wasn't at home. Deciding to have a beer in a small local cafe, we returned again at about 10:30 p.m. and still she was out. So we drove until we found a farmer's field on the outskirts of Lille and after asking permission, camped the night in the field. Day 3, we're starting in northern France. We're ending up 2/3 the way down France, and our daily mileage is 428 miles. Thursday the 12th of July. After a really good night's sleep, we arose and we were soon ready to leave. As we drove south in the direction of Paris, Andrew became increasingly concerned that his bike was getting too hot, mainly due to the fact that the frame next to the engine was hot to touch. So I took out the thermostat as it was probably broken and not allowing the hot water to flow through the circuit easily enough. By 3 o'clock, we were some 200 miles down the road, just southeast of Paris. We visited a Carrefour to buy some food for lunch and to have a wash. We still had over 200 miles to go to our destination, the monastic community at Taizé, and we did some 110 miles without stopping. Then we stopped at a small roadside cafe where we saw the first squat pot toilet.
On this last 50 miles in the dark, we saw 2 crash scenes with diversions and lots of police. The second one involved about 4 cars, and the 2 that I saw were very, very mangled.
We then drove the extra 50 plus miles to Taizé, arriving at about 11:30 p.m. Found a place to camp and put up the tent ready for the night's sleep. Day 4. We started and ended in the same place. It was a rest day. Our total mileage was 14 miles.
Friday 13th of July. We were awakened by a group of young people wandering around the campsite singing yippee-yi, to the tune of She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain. So we arose.
As we sat outside the tent collecting our thoughts, an elder from the community came over to chat to us. As we were obviously new, hadn't checked in, and were making no attempt to go to the 10 o'clock service. Within a minute of her arrival, Andy decided he must have a shower and left me having to explain to the girl that we were only here to have a rest, a shower, and then were en route for Turkey.
We decided to go to Cluny. We got a good brunch and retired to the Abbey, where we sat in the sun, ate, and then lay down on the grass for a few hours. We returned to the commune, then had a pleasant tea of chicken fillet sandwiches and cheap beer.
We then went to the community bar for a drink. At any one time, a person could only buy 1 beer for themselves. You were also only allowed 2 beers per night. After queuing for what felt like over an hour, we managed 2 beers each, then went to bed. Day number 5, we started in the foothills of the French Alps. We then drove into Switzerland, and our daily mileage was 240.
Saturday the 14th of July. Left Taizé at about 10 a.m, just as church was starting, towards Geneva, halfway along Lac Le Mans, where we found a supermarket and a piece of park and had our first sausage and fromage sandwich of the day. Also, first topless women of the holiday. Left Lakeside at about 4 p.m. During the expedition, Ian managed to undertake his first bit of left-hand side of the road driving. Unfortunately, nothing hit him. We had to change from speaking French to German on this road somewhere. We looked up a side road into the mountains for somewhere to pitch the tent, but it was too rocky. We headed back into the valley and found a lush field and pitched it. Halfway through tea, the farmer arrived and told us to go away. Well, sort of, in German anyway. So we packed up and looked for a campsite. It was lovely and only 4 other people there, with hot showers, toilet with a seat, trees, bar and a restaurant.
Day number 6, we started in Switzerland, ended in northern Italy, and our daily mileage was 255.
Sunday the 15th of July. We woke up early in the morning, filled up with gas at Brig and hit the Simplon Pass, 6,500 feet and lots of marvellous views. Also about 40 million other bikes. We went down the other side into Italy and Ian wanted a stamp in his passport, so the border guard told him to go 4 kilometres down the road to where the customs office was, where they advised him that if he wanted a stamp he should go 4 kilometres back up the road to where the border guard is. Italy? Definitely. We had a nice pizza at Lake Maggiore and then we rode nearly 200 miles along the busiest, most urbanised roads. This was definitely not a pleasant ride, so eventually we decided to stop for the night. After about 20 miles more, we found a campsite. It was about £12.50 for the pair of us, so we went to look for a field instead. We found a farm, and unfortunately the woman said, no, nay, never, no more. So we persevered. The next attempt proved successful. We got it up amongst the grapevines. We then went up the road to a cafe where we had 2 beers and 2 pizzas. These were so delicious that we decided to have another 2 of each. It was only after we had left that we realised we had neglected to pay for the second lot. If you believe that, you're a sad case indeed. And then we retired.
Day number 7, we started in northern Italy. We then drove closer to Venice, spending the day in Venice. Therefore, our daily mileage was only 85 miles. Monday the 16th of July, we got up and packed away our tent. We then set off for Venice. After a couple of hours, we arrived at a campsite near Venice. So we leisurely put up a tent, had a shower, brackets cold. Next, we rode our bikes to Venice Island and parked at the bus station. Now, I do need to qualify what I mean by this statement, left the motorbikes at the bus station. It wasn't a bus station 20 miles away and then we took a bus into Venice. We actually drove across the bridge, across the service road and parked at the bus terminal on Venice Island, right next to the main railway station. I'm sure such a journey wouldn't be permitted these days. We then spent an extremely pleasant afternoon in Venice, visiting the tourist attractions, including a Salvador Dali exhibition. The rest of the time was spent sitting, sampling the atmosphere and watching the world walk past.
P.S. Don't forget the fly. Fast forward 100 pages.
We returned to the campsite, then went to the campsite restaurant and had some food, which was overpriced, well, for us, and served by an over-dominant woman who rushed us through our food, decided what we would eat, then made us pay before we'd finished eating, then removed the tablecloth while we were still sitting there. In all, what an old bag. Day number 8, we started at our campsite near Venice. We then went to Yugoslavia. Obviously, the country of Yugoslavia no longer exists, and it has been subdivided into numerous new inverted commas countries. Had we have been there heading for Yugoslavia 12 months later, the country would have been gripped in civil war. Our daily mileage was 286. Tuesday the 17th of July. After getting up, packing and having a cup of tea from an English couple, we set off for Yugoslavia. On reaching Yugoslavia, we headed straight for Rijeka, where we stopped for lunch. It was under a tree next to a VD clinic. Well, Andy thought it was a hair salon, but I'm sure it was a VD clinic.
Then we hit the Adriatic Road number 2 in a big way and hauled arse to get out of this hellhole of a town. With only about 800 kilometres before the next turning. The roads were beyond description, so I won't bother. We eventually stopped about 25 miles north of Zadar. It was starting to get dark, so we agreed a price of $7 for both of us to put up the tent and went for a meal at the next door restaurant. We had ein Hausplatte, which was a massive grilled steak, sausage, chicken and liver with salad and garnish, plus zwei Bier each, which all came to $22, less a little change, about 4 dinar. Only after the boss had been off up the road on his Thomas to check the exchange rate.
P.S. It also thundered and lightninged an awful lot in the night, and we had the first rain of the holiday. Day number 9. This was a truly magical ride. We started towards the top of the Adriatic coast of Yugoslavia. We followed the coastline and ended up at Dubrovnik towards the bottom of the Adriatic Yugoslavian coast. Our total mileage was 273 miles of pure bliss. Wednesday the 18th of July. We got up very late due to the rain, then packed up, changed some money and drove south down road number 2, the mega twisty bendy coast road, till we found a little campsite type shop to buy some food. Here I fell in love. As I walked in, I saw a goddess and told Andrew I was in love. We then bought some things from her, although she did not let on she spoke English. I then returned to her to buy some bread, only to find she spoke English. So I spent 10 minutes or so chatting to her, asking her to marry me, or at least come to Dubrovnik, but to no joy. Her name was Catalina. She was 18 and gorgeous. We then ate our lunch, and as we were ready to leave, she and 3 friends came out of the shop. One particular lad seemed most unpleased with my presence. In fact, rather aggressive.
We then did a big ride to Dubrovnik. We arrived and parked by the port, where a guy was standing doing nothing. He looked very pissed. After not managing to get any sense out of him, he staggered off. We then tried to get a room, but the best deal we could get was £15. So we rode about 10 miles back out of town to the nearest campsite. After pitching up, an Aussie guy called Rob came over and introduced himself. Ian went to bed and I had 1 beer at a bar by the camp and then retired myself.
Day number 10. We needed a rest day. We simply stayed round the Dubrovnik area. Our mileage was a mere 18 miles.
Thursday, 19th of July. Woke up for the second day in a row to the sound of rain pattering on the tent. Eventually we arose, washed and rode into Dubrovnik. P.S. We met the drunk bloke lot from last night whilst in Dubrovnik. He was with his wife, who he had told of our encounter the night before. She was dead friendly. The best bit was when we subtly accused him of being drunk last night and he admitted, "I was paralytic."
We bought and wrote some postcards, then returned to the campsite after a quick beer. Whilst relaxing by the tent, the Aussie guy Rob from the night before came to talk to us. Then his wife joined us. We then shared some smokes and rum. before going as a group down to a local's waterfront restaurant for supper. We shared a mixture of fish dishes, lots and lots of beer, and had some really good company.
Whilst we were dining, it came to our attention that there was a group of exuberant, drunk, Yugoslavian girls on the table next to us. After a few more beers, Rob and Kerry noticed and asked them to join us. Ian made a seat available next to him, and it was soon filled by a pert bum. We all chatted for a while and shared a few more drinks. I'm not exactly sure how, as I was becoming very drunk, but Ian seemed to be hitting it off with this Yugoslavian girl. We had some spirits and a free coffee for Ian. He had a friend who knew the barman. Then Ian left with the young lady after I had agreed to sleep in the Aussie's tent, leaving him at the unprotected mercy of a wild, insatiable beast.
Having drank quite some beer, I found myself kissing Tina at the table and arranging the night's sleeping arrangements. Tina and I left hand in hand. We then walked back to the tent and put Andrew's sleeping bag outside and had a cuddle. And before long, things got serious. So I had a really good night, although only about an hour of sleep. Tina had a very protective brother, so she wanted to go back home in the middle of the night, but stopped until 7:30 a.m. when her brother had gone to work. But she was clearly not relaxed about her brother.
I drove Kerry back to the campsite, and I'm fairly sure that she was holding me a little below the waist. But it was a short drive. I was very drunk by then, and she was married, so I assumed it had been an accident. So I turned round to pick up Rob, and then we returned to the campsite. My sleeping bag and carrying mat were now outside the tent, so I picked them up and went off to find Bruce and Sheila. I lay down on one side with Kerry in the middle, and she started to rub my back. Rather strange, I thought. Also, she's married. So I turned away. She gradually became more and more insistent until I got the idea. It appeared that Rob didn't mind, so I got on with the job.
Day number 11. After the excitement of the previous evening, the quantity of alcohol consumed, and the lack of sleep had, we decided to have another rest day. I also wanted to spend a little bit more time with Tina. We didn't drive very far, we just hung around the Dubrovnik area. Our total mileage was 73 miles. Friday the 20th of July. Tina left at 7:30 and I arranged for her to return between 9 and 10, which she did. We then set off on our bikes, Tina on mine. After Tina changed into her swimsuit top, we decided to ditch our lids and leather jackets and cruise along the coast road. As we drove along, Andrew caught up with me and said, "I suppose you think you look cool." And I guess I did, with no lid, shades and, in inverted commas, sexy chick. After an hour's riding, we found a small beach and stopped. We had a good 3 or 4 hours swimming and messing around. Then we drove back to Dubrovnik and spent some time walking around the old town. At this stage, we annoyed Andrew as we walked hand in hand, kissing regularly, all far too sloppy for him. We then returned to the campsite and I took Tina home. After a shower, Tina arrived again. Tina explained she was having problems with her brother, who soon arrived at the campsite and told me in no uncertain terms if his sister wasn't home tonight, there would be violence. Tina and I had our spirits dampened. We waited for Andy's date to arrive and then drove into Dubrovnik to have a pizza. Andrew and his date had a beer and listened to music, while Tina talked to me, giving me a really hard time. The problem was we had nowhere to sleep and her brother was on the rampage. So we decided to return to the tent for an hour and spent some time together. Then Andrew returned, so we dressed and I took Tina home. We said our goodbyes and went our separate ways. I believe a good time was had by all, and I slept like a baby. Unfortunately, Dubrovnik was hit extremely hard during the war. Interestingly, during our visit I took a photograph, and then a war correspondent took almost the identical photograph, and with a little bit of Photoshop, here's the final result. Day 12. Now, if you look at the map, it would make perfect sense to follow the coast down and go into Albania. However, both Yugoslavia and Albania were still communist countries. Yugoslavia was soft communism. However, Albania really embraced communism to the extent that the entire country was closed to Westerners. So obviously we couldn't go there. Andy had found out about a natural gorge in the mountains. So we decided to head for Tara Canyon. So our starting place was Dubrovnik. We finished in this gorge and our total mileage was about 200 miles.
Saturday, 21st of July. Got up and went into a Dubrovnik supermarket. Had the usual breakfast, fromage and jambon. So we hit the road. We did about another 50 miles on Route 2, the coast road, and then turned off up a small lane that goes up a pass 4,000 feet high. Amazing views, good service and no traffic. So I strapped my helmet onto the back of my bike, put on the shades and got into the scenery. We then went about 15 miles down the wrong road when Ian noticed that we were going up the coast the way that we'd come instead of going inland. We stopped a Yugoslavian, showed them the map and we headed off to Titograd where we filled up and headed to Tara Canyon. Second only to the Grand Canyon apparently. The scenery was pretty amazing. Tunnels and a big gorge. We went up to Tara, had lunch at about 5 p.m. Then on return I noticed Ian had dropped back, found him by the roadside with a flat front tyre. So we unloaded my bike and I took Ian to a hotel about 3 miles up the road so that he could phone Bike Safe. The man at hotel told us that he didn't have a phone, but the hotel back in town did. However, that was 15 miles away. So we went there and asked to use their phone. So after several attempts, Ian managed to get through and they said that they would phone us back. We waited about an hour and nothing had happened. Then a Belgian family who had their motorhome in the car park came in and told us that there was a tyre repair shop about 2 kilometres up the road. So we went there and the guy told us he could do it, but he closed in an hour and a half at 10 p.m.
With which we drove the 15 miles back to the XT motorbike and using a large rock under the crash plate, removed the front wheel and left the bike on the side of a road. We returned to the tyre place at about 9:15 p.m. and then about 7 men and 2 women watched as the tyre was fixed. After several attempts it was fixed and returned to its former glory. We then went looking for food and as everywhere was closed, ended up eating at the hotel. We had mixed grill and chips and beer. We then returned to the XT, which was still standing upright, replaced the front wheel in the dark, and then drove to the nearby lay-by where we'd had lunch some 7 hours earlier. We put up a tent, ready for a night's sleep. It was now 1 a.m. Day number 13. We started in Tara Canyon, Yugoslavia. Having wasted so much time fixing the puncture, we really needed to do some miles. We ended up in northern Greece and our total mileage was 329. Sunday the 22nd of July. We got up early and went into town. Got some petrol and exchanged some dollars. Then we headed out on the highway. We drove all day to Greece and on the way we went up a pass called the Kalor Pass, which is 1,849 metres high or some 6,000 feet high.
There was a dirt track with many hairpins for about 50 kilometres, maybe more. Bloody good scenery though, and a massive gorge.
At the top of the pass is a cafe where we had some homemade salami and homemade cheese made from sheep. It was absolute crap and cost us some £5 each.
We met two Austrian guys here whom we had seen on the road earlier. Chin on the tank, going for it. They had no tent and generally luggage for 1 month in Greece.
We then drove to Greece, arriving just as it was getting dark. We had pizza and general rubbish food, and then drove some 10 miles and found some rough ground and camped the night. Day 14. Today we drove across the top of mainland Greece. We started towards the middle and ended up next to the Turkish border in the east of the country. Our total mileage was 260 miles. Monday the 23rd of July. We got up early and ate biscuits for breakfast. Then we drove through Greece, ending in a campsite on the sea.
Arrived early, about 4 p.m, and went for a swim. Met a group of frogs who were very friendly, but too organised. Mr. Frog was a teacher and had been nearly everywhere. They gave us a coffee. Thank you.
We ate kebab meat butties, which are commonly called sandwiches, in a local cafe for dinner. They were quite good, although the chips were cold. Day number 15. We started off in eastern Greece. We crossed the border into Turkey, ending up a stone's throw distance away from Istanbul. Our total mileage was 178 miles. Tuesday the 24th of July. We got up to the sound of French children making far too much noise. Packed the tent and headed into town. Here we spent the last of our paper Greek money on 2 postcards and some stamps. So I sent a postcard to my mother. We then drove to the Turkish border, arriving at around 10 a.m. We passed through Greek customs, and then on the Turkish side we were faced with total disorganisation. Spending a good hour and a half getting our visa/police stamps and our customs stamps. We left the border and drove inland, heading for Istanbul. After some 15 miles or so, we came off the main road into a small town and found a locals' eating place. We then drove further towards Istanbul along the main road. This road was a real joke. There was, in most places, only one carriageway for cars and extremely slow and dirty lorries. And the road surface was really crap. And as the road became wider with more noise, dirt, heat and traffic, we took an exit just before Istanbul for a campsite at a place called Flora, where we put up our tent and collected our thoughts. Day 16. We wanted to spend the day in the city of Istanbul, so our total mileage was simply driving from the campsite to the train station and back to the campsite. A total mileage of 9. Wednesday the 25th of July. We had arranged to meet the Australian couple from Yugoslavia. We were to meet at midday in a village near Istanbul in a bar, only we were unable to choose a bar which fit our arrangement, i.e. the first bar on the left. We then changed some money into Turkish. We then returned to the campsite and got ourselves ready to go to Istanbul, the final destination of our journey. We took the train from Flora into the city of Istanbul, which apparently has some 11 million people living in it. We then spent the afternoon and evening doing the tourist stuff, visiting places such as the Blue Mosque and other tourists' musts. So impressive, I don't know what they were called. We then checked out the bazaars, which were quite a disappointment. They were not working local bazaars as I had thought, but simply tourist traps selling mass-produced crap. The bazaars also closed at 7:30, unlike the bazaars in Cairo that I'd visited a couple of years previously. We then strolled around soaking up the atmosphere. It was a really pleasant place. Not quite Northern Europe, yet not quite really part of the developing world. Familiar enough to be safe, yet unusual enough to be interesting. A very enjoyable place. We then returned to our campsite, had a beer and wrote our postcards. Day 17. The city of Istanbul is split in half by the Bosphorus River. One side of the Bosphorus Bridge is in Europe and the other side is in Asia. Having driven this far, it would be crazy if we didn't drive over the Bosphorus Bridge, visit Asia, and just say we'd been to Asia. Then by the afternoon, it was time to make our way home back to the UK. Thursday the 26th of July. I looked at my money and found I only had $100, so decided it was time to head towards home and places where we could use our credit cards. We therefore loaded our motorbikes, rode through the Istanbul city traffic and over the Bosphorus Bridge and into Asia. We celebrated with a cold beer. Then it was time to turn around and head over the bridge and back into Europe. The start of a very long drive back home to the UK. Our return journey is another story for another video. But I know what you're all asking. What about the fly that Andy mentioned in the journal when we were back in Italy?
P.S. Don't forget the fly. Fast forward 100 pages. A Venetian fly, unfortunately, he passed away at 1830 precisely, on the 16th of July 1990, due to a severe blow to the entire body from Ian's 37 French franc espadrilles.